Hey, welcome back. We are on day 6, part 6 of my build of this Prusa MK4S printer, which begins to look like a printer now, right? So everything is here except for the print bed, and the y-axis is not completed. And so that's what we have on tap for today. And this should be the final episode in this build series. I will almost certainly have another video coming up on the channel with kind of my thoughts and impressions on this printer and comparisons to other 3D printers that I have and have built and used in the past. And so that'll be coming up in a separate standalone one-off kind of video in the future once I get some printing hours behind this thing. But for now, I want to finish building this according to the instruction guide that we've been following along with. And then there is one final chapter after the chapter we're going to do today, but it's only about like power on, self-check kind of stuff and firmware updates if you need it and that kind of stuff. It's all fairly straightforward, just follow through the instructions. So I don't think we're going to do any video episode on that. So like I said, this should be the final episode of the build series. And yeah, I'm just going to grab the parts we need to get started and let's go for it. So here's our heated bed for the MK4S. It came nicely packaged and wrapped in bubble wrap to protect it. It has a thermistor already built in with the wire already attached and a nice connector on the other end that will plug into our control board. And so I think the first thing we have to do here is install the power cables that will run the heater. So we've got the cables here and they want us to use not the end with these little QR code stickers. They want us to use the opposite end. And it's simple enough. We just take a M3 screw, M3 washer, and go through there. And then this will screw down through here with a M3 nut on the back side to hold it in place. And we have to make sure that the ground connection here is going to be black and the positive voltage connection is going to be red. Don't want to mess those up or bad things will happen for sure. So I'm going to get these screwed down. All right, and they asked me to leave those a little bit loose because now they want, probably for clearance reasons for the little cover that's going to cover these, they want them angled in a bit toward each other, just like this, to make kind of a V type of a connection, and then we can tighten them down. Up next we have the cover for that power connection to the bed, and it is just these two printed parts here. And it looks like this first one needs to have some M3 hex nuts pressed into place. So I will use the method of threading a screw from the back side to pull them in. All right, so with those in place, I'm going to turn this around just so that I have easier access to the end of this that we're working on. They want me to pass the wire here for the thermistor up through the bottom of this. And then we take our piece of nylon filament here, which is again going to provide structure to our umbilical like we've done before. And there's a little hole here in this cover for me to press this down into. Now, they want to make sure that it's not extending out the backside more than 2 millimeters, it says. So just a very small amount there. I'm going to bend this down just a little to hold it in place. And you want it to be curving upward from the part so that it gets the correct sort of guidance tension onto the umbilical. And now we will go ahead and slide this up underneath. And it fits over the top of those nuts that were down on the bottom side of this. I just want to make sure that we have a little bit of slack back here on the backside for our thermistor wires, but not too much, right? So that's looking good. And now we can use one of these M3x10s to hold this back cover in place. Next, we take this sleeve for our cable wrap and we get it started around all of these cables, right? So the thermistor cable, the two power cables, and our piece of nylon that we're using to guide it. And as we did with the other cable wraps, I'm going to just get this started far enough that things aren't going to fall out. And then we can go ahead and just slide it all the way up here as far as it will go. Let's kind of run into the back sides of the ends of these two cables here. And then we can put our cover over the top on this side. And we have these two M3x10s that go in here to hold that cover in place. All right, and they wanted us to screw that down nice and tight so there's not too much of a gap here around the cable. That looks good, and it's captured really nicely. Like, this isn't gonna pull out or have any kind of issues like that. So now what's up next is just to wrap the rest of this cable up through the rest of this sleeve. Up next is the Y carriage, which is this nicely machined metal part here. And we have to start by preparing these little clips that are going to hold the bearings in place. So the way this works is they want us to grab the clip itself, one of these black rubber pieces, and then one of these transparent plastic pieces, and they stack like so. And then we just put 2 screws through like this to hold that in place. So we've got to do that 3 times. And now that we have all 3 of those ready to go, we flip this over to its back side. I will orient it this way since that matches up with what's in the picture in the instruction guide there. And we just screw down 1 here on this side and 2 over here on this side. And I'm not tightening them all the way down, I'm just getting them set in place here. All right, now we'll start with the one on this side. We're supposed to insert the bearing through here. Looking at it from the end, as we did with the other ones, this is going to be harder to get you an angle of it. But the bearings that are actually in there, the 2 lines of bearings, we want them to be in kind of an X shape as we look at it from straight on, rather than, you know, having a line at vertical and horizontals. So I'm going to rotate this around until that lines up like it's supposed to. I'm going to center this one top to bottom here on the screen as we're looking at it. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down. And there is kind of a little indentation in the metal part here that's designed to mirror where, you know, on the sort of north-south axis as we're looking at this, that bearing is supposed to sit. So that helps me to get it aligned correctly. All right, and we're not supposed to tighten this down all the way. Actually, I just did, but I will loosen it back up just a touch here. Because I think once we align the axes, like, these have to be perfectly parallel on the 2 rods that they've captured. So we want to make sure that these are a little bit loose to do that alignment later on, before then we tighten them down for good. So with that done, I'm going to do the 2 on the other side as well, get them in here and lined up with the pocket that's underneath here. The one note that they have in the instructions for these other 2 is that they are actually not centered underneath these brackets. They are pushed a bit towards the inside of the carriage. So this one will be just slightly this way, and this one on the bottom here will be just slightly up that way, so that they line up with the cutout that's underneath. So I'll get those done next. All right, up next we have these rods that the Y carriage is going to slide on, and these 4 printed parts that are going to go on the ends of the rods to hold them in place. So as always, I've wiped these things down with a paper towel just to make sure they're nice and clean. I'll do that one more time with each one as I go ahead and insert it through these bearings. So this one's easy. It just goes on this side into the single bearing, and then the one on the other side has to obviously go through both of them. It seems like our alignment of those 2 bearings is good because that slid right in there, no problem. And now we need to take these end parts, and they have a bunch of these square M3 square nuts that have to slide in place. So 2 from right here on the bottom side, and then 1 from the end here. So I'm going to have to do that 4 times. So 12 of these M3 nuts in total. and pressing them in far enough to make sure that if I look down through there that I'm seeing that the hole in the part is aligned with the threads in the nut. All right, so with all 4 of those ready to go, we need to now go ahead and place these on the ends of these rods, and the orientation matters, right? So we want kind of this part with the split opening pointing towards the inside of the frame. So this one will slide on this way, this one this way, same thing on the top. And I'm making sure to line these up so that they are flush with the end of the rod here as well. All right, and now with the printer back up here on the desk, we're going to flip this whole assembly over. And we want to make sure that the side with the 1 bearing, which is this side to my right here, is on the right-hand side of the printer, so that's correct. And then we're going to screw these end pieces that we just put on these rods into the frame. There are 2 holes here on the front of the frame on each side, and likewise there are 2 on the back. And so we just need to set this down on here and then screw those into place. Now I am leaving these screws a little bit loose because we are going to need to do a final alignment check. So I'm snugging them down, enough to hold these end pieces in place, but they are not being tightened all the way down just yet. All right, and we have 4 screws left. They go in the tops of these holders here. So there's a hole up at the top of each one of these, and these tighten down to just clamp the rod tightly into place. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten these all 4 down now. All right, now we can make sure that we have good smooth motion of our Y carriage all the way back, all the way forward. That does seem really good. And then it wants me to move this all the way forward and then tighten these 4 screws that are holding those rod brackets in place. Seems good. And then move it all the way back. And same thing on this side, tighten those 4 screws. All right, I'm super happy with that. The motion is really good. All right, up next is our belt for our Y-axis. So this part here has a hexagonal opening here for this M3 lock nut. And I think what we're going to do is use this long screw to pull it into place. So I'm going to start this on the screw here, and then just go ahead and use some force to pull it back into place, and then unscrew our screw. And now we grab our belt. Let me get you the right page of the instructions here. There we go. We grab our belt, we start it in this little groove here, which has cutouts for the teeth, and I gotta face the teeth the right way. That would be important. Yeah, just like so. Make sure that belt is pressed all the way down, flush in there. That looks good. And then we use one of these M3x10s just in here, and it screws into the plastic, and that will lock the belt in place or help to hold it in place. All right, and with that in place, they suggest turning the printer on its side. I've turned it upside down here so that you can see the underside of this Y carriage from the camera angle from above here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that piece with the belt that we just secured, and we're going to attach it right here into this opening here on the back side toward the back of the printer of this Y carriage. All right, so now I'm going to take the belt, I'm going to guide it back this way over the pulley in our Y motor, and then back up here toward the front of the printer again. And then just like we did with the other plastic part here, we're going to run the belt through this little grooved opening, just like so. Again, making sure it's seated all the way down in there. And then we'll use an M3x10 screw in this hole here to tighten the belt into place. Now, letting that go for a second, we need to grab our idler and the rod for that. And just as we did with the x-axis, we wrap this around here. And let me see if I can get you a shot of this. So we've got our little idler holder here on the front of our carriage. It's been there for a long time. We drop it in and we kind of pull it forward just a touch and it locks into place. Right, and I guess I should have shown you while I had this picked up that now we can pull this piece here that I'm holding in my fingers back and go ahead and screw it down into the other hole in the underside of our Y carriage there. And then our belt path will be complete. All right, so right here is what those two pieces look like when they're in place. Now we take this long M3x40 screw and go through both of the pieces. And remember, there was that nut that we set in place way back at the beginning of this process. And so this will go through and grab that nut, and then we can use that to pull these two plastic parts closer together, which will then be our mechanism for tightening this belt. All right, and now we tension the belt. And I do not have the tablet with the that worked for the belt tensioning little website app thing that we use for the X-axis belt. I don't have that here in the studio with me at the moment. So I'll go get that and do that separately later on, but it's the same idea, right? You move the belt all the way to the back and then you just pluck this part right here and it listens for the frequency of the vibration and lets you know whether you need to tighten or loosen it based on that. All right, so I finished tensioning the belt. It's looking real good and we have nice smooth motion here now. So what we have next to do are these little expansion joints that sit up underneath the heated bed. And the way that we do these is we just start one of these little screws in each of these 4 corners and 4 sides. So there's 8 total around the Y carriage here. So you start a screw in there, and then this has a little cutout in the bottom so it can slide on from the side. And these things are not square, they're rectangular. So there's a little indentation in the part here that this sits in. So you want it to go this way, not this way. And on the corners, I'll show you on this corner up here, it will actually sit at an angle like this. So I'm just going to go all the way around to all 8 of these spots and start the screw, slide that on, and then tighten it the rest of the way down through the hole in the top, right like this. And now with those expansion joints in place, we can put our heat bed on here. So the way this screws down is with 1 screw in the middle into this hole here, and then 8 screws around the edge into those expansion joints. So the screw in the middle gets this little spacer, which will sit right up there. And then we run this down through the middle of the bed and into that spacer, and then into the metal part, and it just screws straight into the metal part. I imagine this is going to be a little tricky to line up, so I will do my best here. There we go. And I'm not going to tighten that down. I'm going to get all 8 of these other screws started first. If you're seeing the middle part of the
heated bed here looks a little bit shiny. It's because I had gotten some fingerprints on it, so I wiped it down with an isopropyl alcohol wipe before doing the install here, just so that it would be nice and clean. All right, so with all of those 8 outer screws and the 1 central screw in place, the instructions here tell us very specifically the order that it wants me to tighten this in. So we do the middle first, gently but firmly, it says, and then the corners. It doesn't specify an order for the corners, but I'm going to go diagonal and then the sides. All right, so it turns out the plastic part that holds our Wi-Fi module in place, which is this thing right here, is actually what also is the cover for that cable coming from our heated bed into the back of the electronics enclosure. So we have to start by taking this Wi-Fi module and just inserting it into this plastic piece like so. And the connector will be available out the back here. So that's going to sit there for a second while we now take the cables from our heated bed, and I'm going to run them into this. Let's see if I can get you an angle here. There we go. This square hole back here. So we're going to go through there with 3 of these cables, and then the nylon filament piece, as there's a little cutout here that it can actually sit into to secure it in place. And with those through there, we can now go ahead and screw them down to these terminals here, and the thermistor for the bed goes into this connector right here. It's important to get these wires onto the correct terminals, of course, and so our ground is this side here, more toward the back of the printer, and then the red voltage one is toward the front of the printer. And now I can take this cover that also includes the Wi-Fi module, and I can cover the cables on the back here. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get you a camera angle of that, but it fits on here, and there is a little place here for the Wi-Fi module, these little pins here on the Wi-Fi module to plug in on the back of the board here. And then with that plugged in, there are 3 screw holes on the back of that plastic piece that we can just screw directly into the metal casing of the electronics enclosure. And that will fasten everything into place. And then, looks like the final thing before we can button up this electronics compartment is we've got our NFC antenna here. And so what they want me to do with this is to take the very small wire that they provided that attaches that onto the board, and there's a little spot right here that's marked NFC, and it's one of those circular press down connectors if you've ever installed like a Wi-Fi chip in something or a Wi-Fi antenna. It's that sort of thing, so you got to be really careful pressing this down. It takes a little bit of force to snap it in place, but you don't want to break it. There it goes. So we're routing it down here between kind of the back of the Ethernet port and all this power stuff over here. Then they want us to take this isopropyl alcohol wipe, which they provided. The one I used a little while ago to wipe down the heated bed surface was actually my own. I didn't realize they had provided one. But they want us to make sure that we clean off the backside of this antenna, just to make sure that it's perfectly clean, because we're about to use some adhesive on it, I think. So I'm going to set this down on the desk for a second here, and we're going to grab this 3M adhesive strip here, and we're going to just attach it right here on the back of the antenna. Centered, not covering any of our screw holes. We should be good to go. Then we're going to peel that off, and we're going to stick it here on the inside of this plastic part that's going to be the cover for the bottom part of the electronics compartment. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of place it here for a second so I understand how it fits. All right, that makes sense to me. So we'll go ahead and peel this off and stick it down. All right, just like that. Now we can grab the other end of our antenna wire and click it into the other connector here on the antenna. Now they have on this page of the instructions something for us to check just to make sure that we have all of the wiring hooked up correctly, everything plugged in the right places. I trust that I have done that, and so I'm going to go ahead and install this over the bottom here. Being careful not to pinch any wires or anything like that. And we should have these two M3x10 screws here that go right down through there to secure this plastic part in place. All right, and they have us checking our wires one more time to make sure that everything is clear of everything else, that we don't have weird overlaps between our power cables and our antenna and that sort of thing. And that all looks good. And so now we can go ahead and put the cover on. And it screws down with 4 screws here on the corners. All right, I think we're really close to completion now. We've got these parts here for the spool holder, which we need to install like so. And that will sit on top of the printer. And then this is a filament guide, which looks to, I guess, need these 2 little bits of PTFE tubing, it seems, for the filament to run through. So those go here. We secure those down with 2 screws. Screw from the top, hex nut from the bottom, it looks like. All right, and then we've got another hex nut and a little bit longer screw that go down here in this bottom part. Right, and so this will sit up on top of the printer. This will just clip into that aluminum piece, the metal piece that is the main frame of the printer. And then this piece here slides on here and we clamp it down with this screw. Just like this, right? So we can put 2 spools of filament, one on either side here, and then the filament comes out and down through this little spacer hole on its way down to the print head. Looks good. I'll put that on the printer later when I go to set the whole thing up. So now I think we're done, right? Let me see if I can get a shot of the printer itself for you guys. Here it is. Right, all complete and ready to print. The assembly guide here says that I get to eat 5 gummy bears. There are definitely more than 5 left here in the bag. So I'll eat the rest after I finish doing like the setup checks and the rest of the stuff to get the first print going. But right at the moment, I'll eat 5. Then I'm going to go find a spot over there on my workbench to actually set this thing up. And I'll go through this chapter 8. Let me show this to you again real quick. So chapter 8 here in the assembly guide says pre-flight check. And it's just talking about getting the machine booted up for the first time, firmware updated if you need it, connect it to your Wi-Fi, all of those kinds of things. And then there's a little self-check wizard that it goes through the first time that it starts up. And so I'm not going to go through that here on video. I read through it earlier. It seems very straightforward. And so if you're following along and building one of these, I'm sure that you can follow the instructions and do that yourself. And then once that's done, the USB drive that came with the printer itself, I think has some pre-sliced files. So maybe I'll grab the roll of Galaxy Red PLA that they sent along with the printer and put that on here and do a couple of test prints with those pre-sliced files just to see what it's like. Like I said, I'll report back in a future video here on the channel for you guys to let you know my thoughts and how it's printing, how it compares to, you know, other printers I've used and built and all of that kind of stuff. So that'll be coming up. But for now, I'm gonna go get this thing set up and started printing. And yeah, it's been a fun build. It's been mostly straightforward. I didn't really run into any issues at all with, you know, quality of parts or confusing instructions really or anything like that. It was all very straightforward. Of course, you can buy one of these things already assembled and just pull it out of the box and start printing with it. But I like to build stuff because it's fun to build, and also because that way I know how every part in here works and how it all goes together, so that if there are future you know, problems and maintenance that I have to do or anything like that, or like I'm going to do with this one, if I'm going to take it apart to turn it into a Core One later on, I will know how everything went together, and that'll help, you know, to be able to troubleshoot, maintain, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been a fun, enjoyable build. I don't know yet how it prints. I'm expecting good things. So we'll see how that goes. And I'll, like I said, let you know in a future video. Until then, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.